There's a famous phrase in the entertainment industry that says, it took us 10 years to become an overnight success. I feel this could be applicable to most successful ventures today. And the Tempest is one of them. Although it took them 2 rather than 10 years to gather recognized tremendous achievements. Every day we seem to be drowning in unbelievable success stories of products, services, or companies. When hearing them, most of us wonder things like, why didn't I think about that first? Or, I also had that idea a couple of years ago. It is obvious that we tend to overshadow all the hard work, multiple iteration, trials and errors, resilience, and excellence in execution that rig the success process. As our guest Mashal Waqar rightfully said during our discussion, growth is hardly ever accidental. This is the second part of our discussion with Mashal, the co-founder and COO of The Tempest. In part 1 of the podcast, we talked about her exceptional journey. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen to it yet, the link is in the show notes. In part 2 of the podcast, Mashal will talk about the growth of The Tempest, how to hire and engage talent fully remotely, her leadership style and principles, and the challenges laying ahead in their pursuit to making The Tempest a household name.
Brought to you by Scopernia, this is the Future Club, the podcast that uncovers how leaders future-proof their businesses. Here's your host, Jeremy.
All right, let's jump on part 2 when we're going to talk about The Tempest, obviously your role as a leader in The Tempest and how it became the success that it is today. And we're actually going to start with this. So can you quickly run me through what is The Tempest? What are you guys doing? And also, what was it when you joined? And is it different than what it is today? How has it evolved?
Yeah, for sure. So I joined in 2016, and we've had one mission, which is to amplify the voices of women around the world. We feel like the media landscape is broken. We want to change that up, right? So instead of speaking for women, let us speak. We want a seat at the table, and we want to make sure others have a seat at the table. And that's really been our mission. So we started in 2016. And what became The Tempest at that time. There was a couple of iterations my co-founder went through before it did become The Tempest. We started off with 2 verticals. There were conversations about like relationships and culture and family, and then it went from that to us really growing out and becoming a lot more expansive in terms of the type of content. And now we have 8 verticals that cover everything from life and love and weddings to health to career, finance, tech. Like there really is something for everybody. We've got entertaining content, we've got informative content, and we've got all these different perspectives from readers and writers from around the world. Like our team is our audience and the very people we're creating for.
And so how did you, because I believe your audience is quite massive today. How has it been growing in the last years? If you have a couple of figures that you can share with us.
Yeah, I can. So I remember when I had joined, getting getting like tens of thousands of readers was such a big achievement. And then over the years, we've kind of grown from that to having our articles read like, hundreds of thousands of times, millions of times. I think this is a figure from last year where our articles were read more than 40 million times from people around the world. And so, we've really grown in terms of the traction that we've had and in terms of our audience on different platforms as well. And then we also started venturing out from just having articles to newsletters and podcasts and videos.
And because obviously you are also a business. I mean, you are a media company. So what is the business model? How do you earn revenues?
What we do is basically native advertising, which is basically we speak about products and services and we bring them to our audiences for companies that we align with. And so, what we've really broken down is we know what works well with which demographic, and on a very, very granular level, we understand what works and what doesn't. And so because of that, we can create branded partnerships and sponsored content that will resonate and hit home with our readers. And that's going to build trust and really bridge that gap between the brand and our readers and our audience.
So could you give me an example of one of the partnership that you ran recently?
Yeah, so we recently had one of our most successful partnerships, and it was with a sustainable sneakers company, and footwear company. And so we did a bunch of different branded partnered content with them, and it was incredible because we were able to generate over $7 million in sales through our partnership. I think it's proof that like working with diverse media companies is effective, but also just a testament to our audience. So we did a bunch of different really fun campaigns. One of them was we had different people in different parts of the world. So our staff try out these shoes and write their experiences. Some of them really are not into sneakers or shoes, and she only wears heels, and so she tried those on. It was a different experience, and they documented their experience. That was an amazing campaign that took place over the course of, I think it was like 4 months, but definitely one of our best success stories.
And so you've been growing that audience really quite massively in the last few years. Did you feel that it came really organically, or did you have like a really set growth strategy with a lot of initiatives, or how do you feel it came?
I mean, I don't think growth is always accidental. So we've experimented a lot. When I say a lot, I mean like we've really A/B testing and all that stuff. Like we've done it to every point. Yeah, we've had a lot of different experiments with different types of content. We've even repurposed the same articles with different titles and images and see what would do. And there's different types of growth hacking that works, right? So one is time sensitive pieces that get a lot of traction. They work very well for certain momentums of time. And then there's evergreen pieces, which will do well. So an article about like how to get over a breakup, that's kind of like evergreen where it can work well today, 2 years later. This is one of those topics where people will read it because it will resonate and people have these lives or, at any point it could be relevant to you. And so those are the two different types of contents, right? So we've been intentional with that. And we've also realized what kind of topics work well for what regions and what countries and what like groups in these different areas. And then there's always the technical side of things like the phrases, the wordings, the numbers, the images as well. They do play a big extent, the timings and all of that stuff, but also because we're a global company by nature and we have a global audience, having as many different perspectives helps us. And we don't put people in boxes, right? So if I'm brown, I don't need to write about brown culture. I can write about the music I like what about the certain artist that I find fascinating and that has been personal to me. And people really resonate with that. And I think this is one thing that other media companies do is they put people into boxes. And I think that's a big mistake. We're so expansive as people, right? We've got all these different interests and all of this stuff. And this is how every person in the world is. There's so many things that make you who you are. We see that with our content. A person reads the piece and it's not until the end they realize, oh wait, this is a person just like me. So it's it's very intentional in how we do that. And we built a lot of that personal one-on-one connections with our audience. So with our newsletters, a lot of the feedback we've gotten over the years is that a lot of readers feel like they've got this friend that they trust when they read these pieces because they feel connected. And so they're more inclined to take action because it's someone that and again, trust is built over time. It's not something you can spend tens of thousands of dollars on and buy. Right. So that's the other thing is we've been doing this for years now. And I think when it comes to socials and growth hacking, I think it can be about having outrageous content, but also algorithms change so fast. So you really need to have your pulse on what's going to work because what's working now may not work 3 months from now. And I think this is something that we all have struggled with. Like when the whole Facebook the Cambridge Analytica thing happened, I think almost every publisher took a hit. And I think one thing we've learned is we have to be as self-reliant and independent as we can. That's a big part of why we constantly keep testing and iterating and stuff.
One other thing that you told me when we first talked is that your company has been running remotely, also by design, for quite a few years. I think the question I'm about to ask is key to a lot of companies today that are facing the same issue. How do you find the best talents for your business, and how do you keep them engaged if they're remotely working from wherever in the world?
So remote has been a norm ever since I joined, and so we've been remote from the start, and I credit a lot of that to my co-founder. I think the main reason was because we were in different parts of the world, and so that shouldn't be a reason for why you can't work together. Because if you're not remote, I think you will miss out on the best talent. That by construct, like that was always different, and so a lot of times people think remote is something else. I think people make it out to be a lot more intense than it needs to be. So one thing that I've learned when it comes to how you run remote is building that culture where you can communicate and creating safe spaces for people. And that's something that we do, and we do spend time on. We built this whole like working culture where you can talk, like nothing is off the table in terms of speaking about stuff, right? That's one. The other is we've introduced different ways to make people feel comfortable as well. Like we have strict policies in terms of no isms, like curiosity is okay. Any type of discrimination or bias or bigotry is not accepted and will not be tolerated in any form. And we make that very clear from the orientation time, right? The other thing that we also really do is, we're not too rigid in how we run our meetings and our communication, right? So you don't need to talk about work stuff. Just leaving time for interacting and helping people form these bonds works in a very different way. And you need that because you're not in the office space 24/7. You're not working together. So this time you have, which could be seen as wasting time, is not actually wasting time. It's actually useful because people are connecting. And then the other part of it is also just, I think, understanding that every person is, you're part of their journey and they're part of yours, right? When people leave us to work for better opportunities for them, I feel happy because I feel like we've played a small role in theirs, and I'd love to see people grow. I don't think you should be afraid of holding people and keeping them within your company. If they're going on to better opportunities for themselves, like I think that's good for you, and it's a sign of how much even they can grow or how you can grow together, right? Obviously, I'm sad that they're leaving, but I'm also happy for them personally because I am invested in their growth, and I really do care about them. The other part is also like a lot of times people think working longer means working better, but to be honest, be more productivity related, right? Like there are ways to be accountable and to be flexible. It's okay if things don't always go according to plan, like, kids coming into meetings, and I've seen a lot of these things happen over the last couple of months, and that's a norm. Having deadlines, but also giving people the freedom to do that work when they want, right? You don't need to see them working for them to be working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously, if you want to run remotely, it's impossible to keep that kind of level of control, and it's even unhealthy to keep that kind of level of control.
And one thing I really want to say is, we will always bet on the people who traditionally, who may not have that experience or that background, but who really want to do something. Like we do that. Like take me for example, right? My co-founder took a chance on me when she knew I didn't have a media background. And so I grew to become this person that I am because I worked towards it, but also because she took a chance on me. A lot of people in the company, we've had similar stories where they're not traditionally from a media space or that background. And so we take a chance on people. And I think credit to them for working out to become who they become, right? But I think, it takes time and effort to kind of unwire your mind from thinking more experience or relevant experience is the best person for the job. And I think that's another thing which I feel like more people as a leader or as a decision maker take up chances and see people for what they can be, not for where they are. I think that's super important to think about because people will surprise you in the best ways possible. And I think a lot of times the best talent is built. It's not found.
Mm-hmm. So you hire people more for their drive and personality and what they have inside of them instead of
and how they feel about the Tempest and how they feel about their values as well,
obviously.
Right? Like we have to have values that align. So how they feel about obviously our mission and our work, and we're very transparent in that aspect as well in terms of like we're still a struggling and bootstrapped startup. Like we haven't. I think the word success is subjective, where what could be success for you could not be success for me or vice versa, right? And so I think our mission is to become a household name, right, in every part of the world. And we still have work to do before we get there. And so with the resources that we have, it still surprises me that we're here in the work that we've done and everything we've achieved. Because if you look at traditional media companies and journeys, ours is very different from any other journey that I personally know of, right? And that I've looked into. And by norms, we shouldn't have been around. A lot of the companies, when we launched, there were, I think, more than 10 companies in this space. And a lot of them shut down over the last couple of years. And so there aren't a lot of even women's media companies. There is a space. There is a gap in this space. And the other part of it is also women's media companies being run by women. Because most women's media companies are actually run by men. And I think that's something that we also want to change. And, just how, I guess we're just an unorthodox company in that aspect.
So let's go back to you as a team leader. So how big is your team, the team that you manage?
Okay, so we have staff in 24 countries. And in total, so we run an accelerator program and whatnot, right? So I believe in total, our team is around 50 people.
And what are you like as a team leader? Considering your journey and where you come from, it's not that we can say it's a C-suite person that has 20 years of experience in the media industry that has run multiple teams. I mean, it's something that, of course, is 100% deserved, but that fell a bit upon you and that had forced you to very quickly become the leader that you are today. So if I ask anyone from your team what you're like as a team leader, what do you think that they would say?
That's an interesting question. I'd love to hear. I'm going to ask my team this after this call, what they think of me as a leader. But so, and I think this is important to mention because it will give you context to what kind of leader I think I am and the kind of leader I also want to be. So the accelerator program that I mentioned, right? Like we have graduated more than 16 cohorts at this point. We have 3 cohorts a year, and so it's an intense program. And this was the fellowship program, which we then tweaked and made it into an accelerator program, right? So over the years, managing different people and very, very different experiences, and again, very different cohorts of people, is also a big reason why I think I've had to kind of, my learning was kind of accelerated. I will hold you to high standards, and I want you to take yourself seriously because I want you to grow. If you're working with me, I want you to work to be the best version of yourself, and to be everything that you can be. I think that's one. I am empathetic, so there is a safe space that I like creating, and I like to believe that I have created where people can talk to me about things, and whether it's mental health is completely okay, and it's completely, if you're not feeling okay, like that is something that there is completely a room for, right? So I think as a leader, I like connecting with people and understanding what their aspirations and their hopes and their goals are, and trying to understand, one, where they can fit best, but also how can they grow, and how can we play that role in there. That's one thing, but I'm also kind of like a problem fixer, right? So a lot of times when, excuse my language, shit is going down the drain, like I'm not afraid to get nitty gritty and do like the more granular things, do it myself to also show the team, there's no job or task that's too small or too big for anybody. And
lead by example.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I do that, right? I think I'm a little bit reserved in how I am, especially if I'm managing a team. There are certain reservations that I do hold because I also understand that I have to be there for them, and I do have to be that like symbol of strength in a way when things are going wrong or whatever is happening. So I think because of that, I also kind of do hold myself a little bit back when it comes to that. But I guess mostly just human. I think being human. I think I'm a human leader. I think that's the best way to put it. That's the way I like to think of it.
What you have achieved so far as a Tempest is great, and you're on a mission. I think it's a very important one. And as you said, there is a gap that needs to be filled in a media company for women, but also run by women. Mm-hmm. But what is the next step for you guys? What are you trying to achieve? You said you want to make sure the Tempest become a household name, but what is the concrete next step into achieving that?
That's a really great question. And it's interesting because I think media companies have had to pivot. The last couple of years have not been easy on media companies and publishers. And I think COVID really impacted everybody. And so the next step for us is taking this community from online and making it more concrete from an actionable, I guess, point of view. Like we're launching a community for everyone who believes in the Tempest, and where you can have conversations, you can get insider access to experts, and really be part of the Tempest community in the truest sense. We've been working on making it as incredible as we can by really looking at what our readers wanted, what our audience wanted, what they were craving in a way in terms of that connection, and we're working to make this community that space for everyone. And this is also another way that we've actually pivoted part of our business model because advertising took a big hit, and we have suffered quite a bit, right, as well. And so moving from that to the business side of things is, having a paid community, and in this membership program, that's one. Venturing into different sources of revenue, of course, like affiliate marketing is obviously a big one. And with the kind of audience that we have, it makes a lot of sense. But from a content point of view, not just, we've seen our audience go from being for female millennials to growing younger and older on both spectrums. We're starting with women because this is the problem we see, but in the longer scheme of things, I think we would love to become a holding company where we would love to be able to fund and finance independent, content creators and artists and creatives and different people in the industry to create their projects and to be able to do all these things, right? Right now we're pretty remote, but to reach different regions that we don't, maybe even in different languages. There's so much of potential and work that can happen with the kind of content and the kind of conversations we bring forward. We're working to make our media content as accessible as we can, but there's still a lot of work to be done in this area. I'd love to see our accelerator program become a lot more expansive. It's an incredible program where you get mentorship, you also get a lot of first-hand work experience, and you get to build a portfolio in different spaces, right? So we've got design, we've got video, we've got editorial, we've got community, we've got growth, we've got marketing, and we're also introducing audio and tech, and you get accepted into one track. With editorial, for example, you're going to be writing articles and working with editors to get published, and you rotate between the different verticals that you're in. Our applications are actually open for the fall cohort, and so I think it's an amazing opportunity. It's changed so many people's lives, and it's one of our best programs.
All right, very cool. I'd like to close it up with three very short questions. We have the ambition to create a playlist from all of our guests on the podcast. So I'm going to ask you the question: what is a musical artist that you feel is totally underrated today?
I love music, so this is a good question. These days, I think there's a band called New West that I recently started listening to. I love their songs, and I think they're super underrated. They're like an indie band. Majid Jordan is pretty underrated, like their duo. Yeah, so these are two that I think are just incredible.
And what is the best book that you would recommend?
There are so many. This is a tough question. I love reading, so I can name my favorite book, and I can name a more like nonfiction book. Okay, so
perfect.
One of my favorite books, Lord of the Rings. It's one of my all-time favorite books. I think it will always be one of my all-time favorite books, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. From a more nonfiction aspect, I think, so there's a couple. Code of an Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhiani, I think was a great book. Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Amazing. And Becoming by Michelle Obama. I think these are three phenomenal books.
All right, awesome. And the last question, what other business leaders do you think we should speak to?
So Nazla Al-Midfa from Shira, I think she is amazing, and she's done a lot of amazing work in the ecosystem, in the startup ecosystem, and I think has really built it out to what we're becoming, right? And I think she is incredible as a business leader, so I would really recommend her.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure discussing with you.
Thank you for having me.
That was the end of our discussion with Mashal Waqar. We hope you appreciated listening to her and felt inspired by her experiences. We will come back very soon with a new guest. Don't hesitate to follow us on Spotify or to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform so you are notified when we make a new upload. This is the Future Club podcast brought to you by Scopernia. Thank you so much for listening.